Let's take a look back at the Revolutionary War. It would have been impossible for the colonists, the patriots, to win this war without the participation of just about everyone. The build-up to and the fight for independence meant involving lots of people, intentionally or unintentionally, in the conversations about the fight for freedom. In this way, many, who the founding fathers had no intention of extending rights to, came to believe that they too had rights worth fighting for even after the war ends. Slaves, white women, the poor, Native Americans all come to understand the new nation in terms that included their political participation and rights. In addition to this expanded sense of politics and rights, people in the new nation maintained a healthy suspicion of government in which the few ruled. The United States of America would not create a government that placed great power in the hands of a few, in the hands of a powerful central government. The first government of America reflects this suspicion, this desire for a weak central government. Under the Articles of Confederation, the very first government of the United States, each state had one vote in Congress, regardless of size, which means that small states had the same powers as big states. Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, did not have the power to tax. How then would this government function without the ability to collect revenues? Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, did not have the power to regulate foreign and interstate commerce. There was no executive branch to enforce any laws passed by Congress under the Articles. There was no national court system, and amendments to the Articles of Confederation required a unanimous vote. Laws passed under the Articles of Confederation required a supermajority. 9 out of 13 states had to vote yes to pass a law in the Congress of the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation. Under this first system of the U.S. government, every state was as independent as possible, with the federal government only responsible for the common defense, security of liberties, and the general welfare. To this effect, the Articles were purposefully written to keep the national government as weak as possible. The most important law passed under this new government was the Northwest Ordinance. This was an act of Congress under the Articles that arranged for the handling of the territories acquired from Great Britain at the conclusion of the Revolutionary War. Congress provided for territorial governments and for the eventual organization of these territories into new states. Among the provisions in the Northwest Ordinance was the abolition of slavery in all of these territories. This was agreed to by all the states, North and South. One reason this agreement is reached between North and South is that in the North, slavery had begun the gradual progress towards abolition. In the South, fear of competition in the growth of tobacco in the new territories, and eventually new states, encouraged Southerners to ban the institution of slavery in this new region. In exchange for this vote, Southerners got assurances that slaves that ran away into this new territory would retain their status as slaves and would be captured and returned to their owners. This was the new nation's first fugitive slave law. So in a global context, the last 2 decades of the 18th century was really an age of revolutions. There was, of course, the American Revolution, but there was also revolution in France and in the French colony of Saint-Domingue as well. In a sense, the American Revolution and its aftermath marked the most conservative of these revolutions. In the 1780s, there was a fear that the social program that grew out of the struggle against Great Britain would get out of hand and uproot the very foundations of social and economic life in America. As ordinary people began to demand liberal and democratic land laws, uh, moratoriums on debt, and greater guarantees of human rights, they challenged the authority by which the few ruled the American nation. In the midst of these fears of disorder, increasing calls for the end of slavery came. In this context, the call for a constitutional convention in Philadelphia in 1787 was an attempt to stem the tide of this disorder, to stabilize and strengthen the government. The Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia quickly shifted from reforming the government under the Articles of Confederation to creating an entirely new plan for government. While the word slavery does not appear in the original document, the institution of slavery was a central consideration in the convention. In the heated debates over how to determine representation in Congress, the question arose as to how the slaves should be counted. Most of the Northern delegates could regard slaves only as property, not deserving any representation at all. The Georgia and South Carolina delegates were loud in their demands that slaves be counted equally with the whites to determine representation in Congress. Many Northerners rejected the idea of being placed on equal footing with slaves, while others condemned any proposal that would recognize slavery. Article 1, Section 2, that was finally written into the Constitution, probably didn't please anyone, but demonstrated the power of the pro-slavery interests. Every 5 slaves would be counted as 3 for the purposes of taxation and determining representation in the U.S. House of Representatives. Another heated debate, often between the North, the Upper South, and the Lower South, occurred over whether Congress should have the power to regulate the external slave trade, that is, the trade in slaves brought in from outside of the United States. Giving Congress this power raised fears among planters in the Lower South that their access to a consistent supply of slaves would be limited or worse, eliminated. By 1787, 5 northern states had banned slavery or established laws for gradual abolition. While states in the Upper South continued to depend upon the institution of slavery, they no longer depended upon the importation of slaves to support its practice. In fact, some states in the Upper South began to loosen manumission laws, making it easier for masters to free their slaves. Under the threat of South Carolina not participating in the new union, delegates at the Constitutional Convention reached a compromise. Congress was banned from abolishing the slave trade until the year 1808 under Article 2, Section 9 of the Constitution. Finally, the delegates at the convention embedded the fugitive slave law, first passed under the Northwest Ordinance, within the proposed new Constitution of the nation. Article 4, Section 2 extended the requirement to return runaway slaves upon claim of their masters from the Northwest Territory to all states of the Union. The U.S. Constitution stabilized and greatly extended the power of the federal government. It also, legally and politically, entrenched slavery in the new nation well into the 19th century.